As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Fox Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I was looking at the video presentations and the various reports over the last week or so. And every evening, I think, the leader of the opposition has been in a different place every night or every day. Or maybe it's in the same day. Fox Hill, Elizabeth, South Beach. He was in Cat Island. Did I miss out anywhere? Oh, Exuma. Yeah, he was in Exuma too. And I saw. Yeah, no, he hasn't been to Long Island yet. But I saw a video clip.
Two leaders cannot be in the same place.
No, that's true. I saw a video clip of the meeting which took place at the Doris Johnson School for Elizabeth. It was an 8-minute clip. And it was him speaking to the members of the Elizabeth Association. And he started off in the clip by saying that this government is the worst government the country has ever had. That's from the leader of the opposition. The worst government the country has ever had. So, that's my starting point, sir. I just wanted to start off from there because in 2 years, this government has produced nearly 8,500 jobs for this country. In 2 years. And more to come in 2 years. 8,500 jobs, almost. That's what this government has done. And he says this is the worst government. In the 2 years after tourism went into a trough under them, under the Free National Movement, we got in 2013 6.2 million tourists, the highest figure in the history of the country, under this government. That's the worst government, he says, performing. So hyperbole is in high gear everywhere. The campaign is on. There's no rationale or reason. If you say A, they say B. If we say B, they say A. Never the twain is going to meet. And it doesn't matter what resolution you bring, what bill you try and pass. That's right. It ain't going to pass muster with the opposition. That's fine, because the campaign is on. So let the campaign be on. Let it come, bring it on. We are now proposing in this resolution to invest $16 million in the future of our country. The young people. They're the ones who are the majority of the country. They're the ones who the country is going to be handed off to. And now it looks as if this opposition is setting up to say, no, we mustn't be spending the $16 million on these young people to improve the College of the Bahamas, to make it into a university, to get it going, to make sure that we have the talent, to increase the productivity, to make the kids more useful citizens in our country, to build up the country. And now they seem to be setting up to say, nope, let's not do that. Not at this time. Like independence, not at this time. National insurance, not at this time. Not at this time. Yeah, no defense force. I don't even know if they supported the College of the Bahamas when it came. I suppose they said not at this time either. But what we do know is we have 4,500 students in the College of the Bahamas today, and they are our future, and we are going to invest in them and make sure that they succeed. That's what we're going to do. I've had a long history with the College of the Bahamas. It's 5,300, even larger than I thought. But a long history of the College of the Bahamas. And some of its successes are in this place. One of them is the Minister of State for Finance. The other is my friend Reynard Rigby, who is an attorney and used to be the chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party. To my right is the Minister for Social Services. The numbers go up. But the point I wanted to make here is that, and I've said this story before, I first met the Minister of State for Finance when I was caused to be a lecturer filling in at the College of the Bahamas in politics and government. That was 1988. And I tell this story all the time because it was 12 years later that he was elected to Parliament and became a parliamentary secretary in the government and now is today a Minister of State. And I use that as a story to say that's where the leadership group of the country comes from, the College of the Bahamas. So why not spend $16 million to make sure that that group succeeds? Now, they talk about borrowing and they talk about costs. There's something that parents do, and I admire this. You know, people who have the privilege, who are able to have children and take the business of parenthood seriously, do everything that they possibly can for their children. You only have to see when the time comes for the scholarships to be allocated. And you see how parents go to the nth degree to make sure that their children are able to get into university. And this is a vexing problem for the Minister of Education because the resources are simply not there to provide a scholarship for everybody who wants to go. Usually, it's an easy thing for the people who are at the very top, the super achievers, the 4.0s, the 3.5s. What is the more difficult group to deal with is those who are in the 2.5 to the 3 range. But these people who, by dint of their own strength and plodding along, will succeed, need to be supported as well. The problem is you don't have the resources to do so. And so he tries to stretch the pennies, and the parents try and stretch their pennies, and they do whatever they can to make sure their children get ahead. Even if they have to borrow to the last cent, they go and borrow. Now, I want to use that as an example of what our country has to do for the next generation. If we have to borrow to improve the education of our children, and we're not talking about borrowing $1 billion, we're talking about borrowing $16 million, which I am advised is 3 days' revenue for the Bahamas government. $16 million. Which we collect $16 million in 3 days in the Bahamas. That's what we're talking about borrowing. The terms, I understand, are after we sign the agreement, we don't have to pay for 5 years from the execution of the agreement. By that time, the economy has grown, it's turned around. You've got an $8 billion economy here. How is the economy going to survive if we don't invest in our future, in our own people? If we don't take the chance, even if it means to borrow, to support what happens to the development of our young people? You know, exactly. You know, one of the issues we have with these developed countries today in our foreign relations is how they all come calling to us for vote for this and vote for that. And one of the issues that we've been trying to address with them is the increasing difficulty that Bahamian students have getting visas to go to these developed countries to get an education. Clearly, all of the skills can't be taught at the College of the Bahamas, but we need clearly to develop a University of the Bahamas because it is increasingly becoming more difficult to go overseas to study. I don't know how some of these parents do it. If you want to get into a top-flight university in the United States, you're now paying $50,000 a year. Where do you get the money to do this? When you go down to the U.S. Embassy, every year I get at least half a dozen requests for people saying, look, I just need to show the U.S. Embassy that I've got $50,000 in a bank account so I could get a visa to go to the United States. And time again, I've met with U.S. officials. I said, I don't know whether you're doing this or you're not doing this, but this is ridiculous because no one has that kind of money sitting around. And parents will be honest in this country and they will pay for their children. They can do it, but that is not a just demand to make. We consider that a barrier to fair trade to be doing that. But every year it becomes more difficult to do this. We have spoken to the Canadians. We've spoken to the British about their visa procedures, where people are being turned down, it appears, arbitrarily, because they miss some piece of paper, and then because the procedures aren't done here, you have to send back down to Jamaica. That takes 4 weeks. Parents are frantic as the school year is beginning, and their children are not in school. And then, of course, these same countries come calling to us, saying, can you support us with this or that? And then when we answer back and say, this is what we want you to solve, very often the answer is, we don't deal with visa issues. We don't deal with visa issues. But for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, we have to invest in education. We have to invest in our children and in our future. There are other examples of those who've succeeded, not only from this side, but also from the other side, of people who've gone to the College of the Bahamas. One remembers now the chairman of the chairman of the Free National Movement, Mr. Darren Cash, who was head of the student government movement there and got his whole start in politics and public life through the College of the Bahamas. So there's no reason why we should not be supporting this resolution. And certainly the question of whether we should be borrowing at this time, certainly the terms show that there's no reason why we should not be investing in the College of the Bahamas and in our future. I want to, therefore, congratulate the people who are currently at the head of the College of the Bahamas, the chairman, the former Attorney General, Mr. Alfred Sears, and all the members of his council. I want to congratulate the minister for having brought this resolution to move this process of the university along. You know, this project could have been finished 5 years ago, except for the vagaries of democracy having caused the Progressive Liberal Party not to be in office. And then our successors decided for some reason that University of the Bahamas was not a priority. And so the project was put on hold for 5 years. So now we're back and we mean to complete the project. And every time we get up and say we're going to finish some project, there are always 10,000 reasons on the other side why the project should be finished. I said it before. No, not at this time. Don't do it. But nevertheless, we proceed with what has been called the heavy lifting that we have to do. And we saw some of that heavy lifting here today as the announcement was made over the question of what happens with the amendments to the Constitution. And since others have had their say on the matter, I simply want to say on the matter, of course, that I support those amendments 100%. And it is yet again, Mr. Speaker, an example of why education is so important. I met the head of the it was then called the Lutheran International School in Grand Bahama. I think it was called the Lucaya. It is now run by the Baptists. Sunland. Yeah, Sunland Lutheran School. So there was a young Lutheran pastor at the time, and he made the point to me that education was important because for a lot of reasons. But he said one of the reasons is that it makes it easier to govern if you have an educated population. Because with an educated population, people understand what the objectives are, and you're able to mobilize people behind those objectives. And so that always stuck with me. And what we tried to do in our last platform was to say that we were so committed to education It's been something that the Progressive Liberal Party has been committed to since 1967, when the priority in our budget became education for the first time. And I believe it has continued so from that time to this. It gets, of all of the ministries, gets the lion's share. We believed it was so important to invest in the future of our people. So with an educated population, you're able more quickly to mobilize behind objectives. And you have a less rumor-prone society. And we find out daily how the pitfalls of rumor and innuendo in this society can derail so quickly public policy that you're trying to develop. I have said to my colleagues, it is clear that when you're trying to sell public policy in this country, you better not have a minister and a pointer trying to make a rational argument, because you won't sell it. Because for 1,000 different reasons, you've got the down market press, you've now got social media, and everybody with a whole rumor mill and swirl and attack against the policies, and people go running off behind that instead of listening to the rational argument. That appears to be so many, in so many cases, what happens in the society, to the point where you wonder whether the whole process of consultation is something that you ought to avoid, because you keep asking and then you keep getting the wrong answer, and the country is in fact set back because you don't actually get to make the decisions which are in the best interest of the country. And what is really interesting is how the society is also getting so impatient of debate. I was reading with some interest and fascination the reverend gentlemen who were in the House a few weeks ago and the comments which they made decrying the vote which took place in the House on gaming. And Mr. Speaker, I thought it was fascinating, if I remember this correctly. They said that one of the preachers said that they hoped, they were praying, they said, they were praying that all those who voted for gaming in the House of Assembly would lose their seats at the next general election. I read that in the newspaper. I thought, this is interesting. All those who voted for gaming should lose their seats at the next general election. I said, now, this is interesting because of all the things you can pray for, you know, an end to poverty, an end to hunger, pray for world peace, that there be no civil strife in the country. But you are using your talents and energy to pray for members of Parliament to lose their seats in the next general election. Anyway, that's the level of the public debate. And it's a free country. Those same reverend gentlemen were giving advice to some other citizens that they must sit small. In other words, even though they have a vote and even though they have a voice, they must say nothing. They must be quiet, as if only one set of people have the monopoly on making public commentary. So that is what happens, what passes for public debate, and of course it is what it is. And we understand it to be an occupational hazard. But we are investing in the future of the country. There are all sorts of things that we have to do. I started out by saying that the leader of the opposition claims we're doing nothing. Another of the leader of the extra parliamentary group was out here with a bullhorn last week saying that we are doing nothing. In answer to something I was saying on the demonstration which was had out here last week, he says that I should pay attention to immigration and not whether there's a rent-a-crowd out in the public square. Mr. Speaker, I do want to say this because this is an opportunity. I wasn't here last week to deal with something which has just occurred, because I take these responsibilities on immigration very seriously. And This country faces a very, I don't want to incite people, but this country faces a very serious time with the question of immigration. Overnight, there was a landing in Sandy Point, night before last, Sandy Point, Abaco. This appears to have become, Abaco appears now to have become the landing spot of choice for migrants coming to this country, because it appears that they're able to melt into the population. So far, at Sandy Point, this landing night before last, 57 people were captured by Immigration, Royal Bahamas Police Force, and the Defense Force, and will be brought to Nassau for repatriation. The interviews that they conducted with the people on board the boat suggest that there may have been as many as 150 people on this boat. So the search continues because they believe that people have gone into the pine forests, and so they're still trying to find them. I believe this morning they found 25 still wandering in the bush. How much? 26 people they found wandering in the bush this morning. What is also frightening is that they said that they believe the interviews, people who were interviewed thought that there were 150 people on this boat. But they believe that 11 people were simply thrown overboard on the way. The interviews that they conducted said 11 people may have been thrown overboard on the way to the Bahamas. This is really serious stuff. And when I last spoke here, I spoke also about the issue of whether or not the law and order for the Bahamas is possible in some areas, because we don't want areas to develop to be no-go areas in this country. So we need everybody to gather behind all of the objectives that we have with regard to this immigration policy. It's going to require discipline. It's going to require Bahamians to stick strictly to the law and to resist the temptation to say, release mine, but catch everybody else. Because this threatens to undermine the integrity of the Bahamas. And I'm really using this opportunity to repeat what I said in Exuma over the weekend, that I'm calling for the full support of the Bahamian people in this fight which we have ahead of us. We have a wealthy country to the north of us and a poor country of 10 million people to the south of us. In 2006, the International Organization for Migration said that there's anywhere between 30,000 and 75,000 Haitians in this country in some state of transport or transportation, either here or on their way to the United States. So the fact of the migration is not something that we can stop because of the fact that the United States is where it is, and Haiti is where it is, and the situation is what it is in Haiti. What we have to do is we have to manage this issue, and it is going to require all Bahamians to do so. People are fond of saying, and some of the political leaders opposed to us were, the Minister of Immigration would do this, and the Minister of Immigration would do that. But I want to say it this way. The people of the Bahamas must do this. If we are to have this issue stopped and managed, it's the people of the Bahamas that have to join the fight to stop it. And in making the statement at the United Nations on behalf of the country, one of the things I said is we have looked at other countries and we have seen how illegal migration left unchecked can cause issues of civil strife, and we do not intend for that to happen in the Bahamas. I say all of this parenthetically, and I suppose as a preface to say that yes, the regulations are going to become tougher. We are seeking more resources from the government for greater enforcement of the law to be sure that those people who are supposed to be in the Bahamas, who are documented to be in the Bahamas, are in the Bahamas. And it is absolutely necessary for the national security of this country that that be the case. We need the support of all the Bahamian people in order for this policy to succeed. I don't know of any other way to put it, and I wanted to use the opportunity, since this is the first opportunity to say so, to say and to ask for the full support of all of our citizens in this fight. You can see, Mr. Speaker, that it's also a very dangerous business. If this report turns out to be true that people are being tossed overboard, that's a very serious business, because that means that you may in fact be looking at something much more than smuggling, but you may be looking at higher crimes than smuggling. And so the police are, and the Defense Force are in the middle of their investigations in connection with this. And we will be working with the authorities in the United States to see how their assets can be used to anticipate what we think is likely to happen over the next few weeks. Because every time the weather is good and you see a full moon is coming now, then the boats set off from the North Haiti. And the question is, how do you stop these boats at source? And these are not cheap trips that they're making. Someone is being, I think a boat captain was charged a few weeks ago, and one of the interviewees said that the persons on board that vessel paid $1,500 a head for that journey. So people are making it. Yes. Yeah. 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 And you know and Mr. Speaker, what happens is as soon as the boats launch off from the north of Haiti, text messages and cell phone calls the whole way up. The boats are coming up, so they're being able, in some cases, to evade the authorities. The situation has basically been stopped up in the middle of the country, and so increasingly they're taking the more dangerous journey up the ocean route on the eastern flank of the country, and thus Abaco becomes the place of choice. So I think that all people ought to take seriously what is happening in connection with this, and the Bahamian people should support the efforts to try and put a stop to this. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, in concluding, that this has been a good opportunity for me to support what is my number one interest, and that is the education of our young people. I repeat, there is no finer thing that this country can do but to invest in young people. And this is a great opportunity for us to signal again the importance which we find in that investment and in that group of people. And what more can we say? That as we hand off this country, we want to leave them a country which has good values, and they have an education which is going to take them throughout the world. People keep worrying about whether Bahamians are going to come back or not going to come back. We're giving them an education so they can go out and conquer the world. Wherever they are, conquer the world, and they'll come back home one day, and provide support for this country. And no Brian McCartney speaking on a bullhorn, the PLPs dressed up in green T-shirts is going to stop that at $25 a person. Thank you.